Hey guys, here's a bonus episode. I jumped on the radio with Doug Amos on the Max ROundTable on ESPN The Ticket in Montgomery.
Now that the portal is closed, we know Hugh Freeze makes the statement late last week. Well, nobody in the portal is really exciting me right now, but that doesn't mean something couldn't happen tomorrow that excited me. And then boom, it happens. Give us the Zac Blackerby take on this stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, first one is Casey Thompson, right? The former Texas and more recently, the former Nebraska quarterback. He enters the portal. A lot of Auburn fans get excited. He's quickly on Auburn's campus on an official visit about 48 hours after the fact. And then on Sunday, the last day that the portal was open, you see Payton Thorne, the former Michigan State quarterback, enter the portal. And with Thompson kind of coming and going, kind of makes you wonder. It kind of seems like, Doug, Hugh Freeze is really interested in what Payton Thorne could offer to this team.
And 2 years to one there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe, we talked about this with Gordy for a little while, if you bring in Thompson and you sit down the other two guys, Geriner and Robby Ashford, and say, look,
sure,
this guy's got more experience. We're going to pretty much believe that he may win the job, but we don't want you going anywhere the next time the portal opens. We want to improve your play, get you better, because he's just going to be here 1 year, and we think both of you guys, or individually, you'll have a great chance to make it happen in 24. What are your thoughts about that?
If that happened, I don't know if the guys currently on the roster would buy it.
Got it.
I think I don't think Hugh Freeze would mind if either of those guys enter the portal next year. I think they need him. I think he needs them this year. It's going to be in December, right? It's going to be in December next time it opens. So after the season. And so I think I don't know what Robby's graduation situation is. Obviously, he's already transferred once from Oregon to Auburn. And so he'll have to do similar to what TJ Finley announced he was doing yesterday. He's going to have to wait to graduate to be able to transfer again without sitting out. Then Holden Geriner could transfer whenever he wants. And so, especially if it's Payton Thorne, who, like you said, has 2 years left, the timing makes a little bit more sense when you do it that way. If you look at the quarterbacks that Hugh Freeze has brought in, not the ones that he inherited, but the ones that he brought in. So it's all of a sudden in 23, you would get Thorne. In 24, you would get Thorne unless he was either really bad or really, really good and went to the NFL. I think he's going to be kind of in the middle of the pack there. So you probably get 2 years with him. And then you got Hank Brown, who will be a freshman this year, so he'd be a redshirt sophomore at that point. Or you can bring in Walker White to start, after 2 years of Payton Thorne. So the timing makes more sense in my mind if you get the 2 year dude. And so, and then all of a sudden Hugh Freeze has quarterbacks to pick from that he brought in, not that previous guy brought in.
Has there been a decision made either way, the young man, or whether Auburn's interested in the Michigan State wide receiver that jumped into the portal basically the same time Payton Thorne did?
I'm sure they're interested. I'm sure Auburn's interested. I don't know. I haven't really heard a whole lot about Coleman being interested in Auburn. Talking to folks up in Michigan State, as soon as Thorne entered the portal, there was buzz around, okay, he's probably going to Auburn. With Coleman, there was a lot of buzz to Oklahoma, and a few other schools have popped up since then. I've seen Florida State, I think, be kind of another leader. I'm sure Hugh Freeze and, Marcus Davis, I'm sure they've called him, but there's also a report that 247 put out, I think last night, Doug, that Coleman entered the portal to get away from his quarterback. I don't know if I'm buying all that. But, I mean, if that's the case, then, of course, he's not going to come to Auburn.
But wouldn't you say, and let's leave that potential fact off to the side for a second.
Okay.
If you're a guy that has had success at the Power 5 level in a league like the Big Ten,
right?
If you looked at Auburn's wide receiver room, wouldn't that be an attractive landing spot to you if you were going to leave, and especially getting down to the South into the league where more guys sign NFL or get drafted by the NFL than any other league?
Yeah, but they haven't done it at Auburn, right? Yeah. So, I mean, if Bama called or if LSU called, I'd probably pick up the phone and talk to them. But until Hugh Freeze kind of elevates the play at wide receiver, if I was a top guy, I don't know why I would go to Auburn. I'm just being honest, Doug. I mean, you've seen guys get drafted and they end up being a little bit better in the NFL than they were in college. Your Anthony Schwartzes or your Darius Slaytons, and he even dropped off this past year some. But I think Hugh Freeze is going to have to develop some of these guys that he has on the roster and kind of prove to say, like, hey, doesn't matter who you are, I can get you open and I can help you accumulate yards. And we'll certainly see if he's able to do that. I talked to Camden Brown yesterday, Doug, and he loves this new offense. The receivers love this new offense. They feel really good about the work that they did in spring as far as dissecting and absorbing everything that Philip Montgomery and Hugh Freeze were talking about. But they've still got a long way to go, and they're all open to the fact that there's going to be a ton of battles still going on in the fall, which Auburn needs right now because competition makes you better as a team and as a program, as a roster. So as far as attracting top receivers, I don't think it's a coincidence, Doug, that Auburn has offered a lot of these top receivers in the portal, but nobody's been super excited to come here yet.
So I want to ask you this because you're much more qualified to answer it than me. You talk to players on a daily, weekly, if not daily basis. If I were a wide receiver, and forget that it's Auburn, I would be more interested in Hugh Freeze and what he's done at Ole Miss and at Liberty with receivers. Not so much what the last couple of Auburn coaches have done with the receivers. I want to know what's happening in the future, not the past. And, Dante Moncrief played at Ole Miss under Freeze. So did Laquan Treadwell. He had some other receivers that did really well. He was able to recruit some really good receivers. That's what would most interest me. But maybe I'm off base there.
Yeah, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. I mean, he had a great run of receivers at Ole Miss, and there are some Liberty receivers that got drafted over the weekend too. One to my New England Patriots. So there's no question, Doug. But I still think if you're a receiver and you're seeing some of these receivers take their time, right? Like Burton, the former 4-star Ohio State wide receiver, or Montana Lamonius Craig, the Colorado receiver that's in the portal right now that is a lot of people are calling and hitting up right now. These guys are taking their time. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that, like, okay, who's going to be throwing me the football? And that's something that if they ask that question to Hugh Freeze, either he knows something that isn't made public yet, which could certainly be the case, or he has to say, I don't know yet, but I hope it works out. And so until a Payton Thorne or a Casey Thompson come in, I don't think receivers are going to be thrilled to transfer to catch passes from Robby Ashford. That's just how I think right now.
So let's talk about what we do know. Auburn did get a commitment out of the portal this week. Talk about the edge rusher from App State. You had mentioned last week that was a position of need, that the coaches were looking hard in the portal for some help there.
Yeah. Jalen McLeod, the top edge rusher from App State a year ago. I think there's a lot to like about this guy. He's got a good motor. He's got a good first step. He's aggressive. He's violent at the point of attack. And I think this is what this is like the positive side of the transfer portal. We always want to complain about, certain nuances of the transfer portal in the current state of college football. And I get it. People can do whatever they want. But this is a kid who out of high school, his best offer was App State. And then he develops as a football player, and all of a sudden, schools for the best conference and the highest level of college football want him to elevate his game and come on. And so now all of a sudden he can play in the SEC and potentially get drafted down the road, maybe a little bit higher than he would have at App State. So I think that's pretty cool. Consistent pressure. His best game of the season last year was against Texas A&M, which is cool because that was pretty much their best competition that they went against. And Texas A&M's not great, right? But Auburn plays Texas A&M. They play teams that's going to be in the same tier as Texas A&M. So the fact that he wasn't just accumulating stats by beating up on smaller teams, he could do it against teams in the SEC. That was in Texas A&M too. It was in College Station. So got 5 quarterback hurries against the Aggies last year. Auburn will take that this season against the Aggies in a heartbeat from one player. So you like that. Some interesting things, and this is just kind of the nerdy stuff that I look at, but the jack position that Hugh Freeze and Coach Roberts, the defensive coordinator, have brought in so far, the build's a little different. They brought in the lone 5-star from this past class, Keldrick Falk, 6'5", Elijah McAllister, both these guys 6'5", 6'6", 260-ish pounds. This dude is not that. Some places have Jalen McLeod listed at 6'1", 230. I've seen other places have him listed at 6'2", 220. Regardless, this is a smaller guy. I'm curious to see if they can use him on early downs against run-heavy teams that run early in the snap count when it comes to conference play. I'm curious. I'm curious to see how they use him. I think he's going to be primarily just used as a pass rusher.
Zach, over the last couple of weeks, you've been not very optimistic. If you were pushed against the wall to say how many wins you think are coming in 2023. Is that changing any? You're growing in optimism here? Because I think your number over the last couple of weeks has been around 6. So I'm curious as to where that stands now.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the time when I answer that question, it's 7 and 5, which is pretty dang close to 6. Yeah. I don't know where we've added another win or two yet. Is Payton Thorne a 1 win or 2 wins better than Robby Ashford? I don't know. I could talk myself into it to some extent, but is the passing game going to get dramatically better? I'm not sure, because you're probably going to lose some of the rushing game too, if that's the case. So I don't know. Right now, Doug, until something crazy happens and Auburn brings in some receivers and maybe another jack or two that you feel pretty good about the pass rush, I'm probably going to stay at 7 and 5 for a while.
Zach, I want to take a break. When we get back, I want to share with you a conversation that I had with former Auburn quarterback Charlie Trotman about Hugh Freeze. And I think it's very intriguing because we both agree on this, and I'm dying to know what your feelings are, and I'll share it with you when we get back. Well, we were talking just about Hugh Freeze and how much he was buying into Coach Freeze, and much more so now than perhaps when the hire happened. And he loves the humility that he sees from him, and he compared it to that of Bruce Pearl when Bruce Pearl was hired at Auburn, and he sees it like I see it. I fully believe this, Zach. I'm curious as to where you are. I think Bruce Pearl will coach his last college basketball game as Auburn's head basketball coach, and I'm believing the same thing with Hugh Freeze. I don't think he's going to ever leave for another job. I think he's going to do really well, and I believe he'll coach his last college football game as Auburn's head coach.
That'd be a great situation for Auburn, because that means he's winning. That means he's winning, and he's recruiting, and he's doing everything he needs to do at a high level. So that'd be awesome. I'm not quite ready to say that, but man, there are a lot of similarities between him and Bruce Pearl, aren't they? I mean, just the whole, this feels like the last chance, to kind of come back at a high level, and then the emphasis of recruiting and just the way that they can connect with one another and to the players and the boosters and to fans. I mean, at any time you stop Hugh Freeze at the complex, he's not going to just keep walking and say, "Hey, good to see you," kind of thing. He's going to stop, look you in the eye, and talk to you like a human. And that's nice. I don't think Auburn's really had that since Tuberville. So, I mean, that's a pretty cool thing. And Auburn people are going to really respond to that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. I'm curious, through your interaction with the Locked On Auburn fan base, have you noticed any? I feel at first it seems we're kind of removed from it now, but it seemed at first there was pushback and not everybody was on the same page, but it seems like that's changed.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty surprised. I talked about this probably a few months ago at this point, but I was surprised how quickly the side of folks, the part of the Auburn fan base that was against the Hugh Freeze hire, they chilled out pretty quick. And it wasn't even, I think they kind of stopped pushing back even before he really got the recruiting stuff going and finishing out the 23 class the way he did. So I don't know. I guess Auburn's PR was let's just grin and bear it and see what happens, and it'll go away. And it did. It went away in probably 36 to 48 hours after he was hired.
I'm getting a bunch of texts, Zach, saying, "Oh yes, please. I think he will coach his last game at Auburn." So they kind of like that. And as you mentioned, do we really know? And we haven't known since. I think almost Pat Dye, quite frankly, because of the turmoil that was present during the Tommy Tuberville years. Do we really know what an Auburn football program looks like with complete stability at the head coach's position?
I think there were parts of the Malzahn era that showed that. Early Malzahn, 2013, 2014, I think certainly had that. And then kind of feels like the Malzahn era, it couldn't peak because he obviously never went back to a national championship after his first year. But 2017, I think there was a feeling around the program, like after the Iron Bowl, when Auburn, for the first time really that I can remember, in my adult life, that like actually handled Alabama. And there was a feeling in that post-game press conference that like Gus had done it. Like Gus had figured out how to do it. And then obviously you get whooped by Georgia because Kerryon got hurt in the SEC championship game. But there was kind of a belief at that point where it's like, okay, maybe this has been it. And then it kind of fizzled out because they forgot to recruit offensive linemen after that. But I think you felt it through parts of the Malzahn administration. I'm higher on Gus than a lot of Auburn people. I think a lot of Auburn people are kind of acting like Gus was a worse head coach than he actually was while he was here. But man, we kind of heard all these stories about the recruiting during Malzahn and the recruiting during Harsin or lack thereof. And it's like, we've talked about this before, Doug, when we were listing out traits that you wanted in the next head coach, recruiting was a big part of it. But I've never really covered that before because Malzahn didn't really do it. He had a staff that would, they recruited the heck out of folks, were consistently in the top 10, but they didn't wake up obsessed with it. And Brian Harsin, of course, didn't. And so now seeing what Hugh Freeze is doing and his staff is doing, it feels different. It feels different, something that I've never really been able to cover before because it hasn't been at Auburn. And so I think from a recruiting standpoint, yes, the stability is certainly there. Now the difference is, and the caveat is what does NIL look like? How do you handle the stability with NIL when the rules seem to be changing every 6 months? So I still think it's going to take time, but the path to stability seems clearer at Auburn now than it ever has.
So help me with this. And this also came up. We have very interesting breakfast, Charlie and I. You should come sometime.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
We always pick up the tab for visitors, so you would eat for free. Okay. But it seems that over the last couple of regimes, and maybe even going back further, that there has been input from folks outside the football office into the program. Okay, we'll just call it what it is. We'll leave it at that. Does that still exist to an unhealthy extent? Because there's always some of that. I don't care what program you have. There's some of that at Alabama. There's some of that at Georgia. There's some of that at Oklahoma and USC too. But it can get to an unhealthy level. I don't know what that is, but we feel it when it's there. Where does that stand currently as compared to maybe where it's been over the last handful of years?
That's such an interesting conversation. I think I look at this a little bit different than a lot of people. And, this may get some Auburn folks upset, but you need that. To a certain extent, you need that. You're telling me Nick Saban doesn't have a list of 5, 10, 15 people he can call to, put an NIL deal together if he catches when one of his guys is leaving? Of course he does. Of course he does. So, I'm glad that you said the unhealthy level because it kind of felt like it got to that point towards the end of the Malzahn stint. But, you've got those guys in the Auburn basketball realm, in the Auburn basketball arena that are very, very involved. Bruce Pearl just knows how to handle it better. I don't think Gus really mastered the social aspect of all of that. And I think Hugh Freeze is going to have that. Nick Saban has that, obviously. Kirby Smart seems to certainly have that. And so, I think you have to have it, Doug. I think you have to have those people to win right now. And so if somebody's giving you $1 million, whether it's to your program or to your collective, you got to give them you got to make them feel like they have somewhat of an input. or, you may lose that money. So it's a weird balance that I think you have to have somebody that socially gets it and is able to play that game. That's where the politician role comes in. That's what Brian Harsin would not do. And I think, if you're a head coach in the SEC, yes, you're a head coach, but you're also a salesman. You're also an executive of a multi-million-dollar company, and you're a politician. I mean, you've got a lot of hats you got to wear.
All right, Zach, as we begin to wrap up here, your thoughts in the basketball portal, what's happening there? We always like to get updates from you. Do you foresee some different things? I kind of thought some things would have already happened since we last visited, and I'm a little bit surprised they have not.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I thought more would have happened as well. I guess the Matthew Cleveland stuff is still in the air, but if you're an Auburn person, you got to feel not as confident as you did a while ago. But you still got Chaney Johnson. You got Aiden Holloway coming in. I mean, there's a lot to like about what they're doing. But yeah, I'm with you. I thought the roster would be closer to finish at this point than it is.
And final point, looks like Butch Thompson's baseball team may be coming to life a little bit here late. Great.
Yeah.
This past weekend.
Yeah, good for him and good for those guys. And so, you go out and you win a series on the road against South Carolina, the number 3 team in college baseball, who didn't drop at all in the polls, by the way. And then it doesn't get easier. Now you got to play the number 1 team in baseball, and they're the number 1 team by a pretty wide gap. And so if Auburn can keep it going, and if they were somehow able to take 2 out of 3 against LSU, all of a sudden it's like, okay, Auburn's back in postseason play, and they're playing at a level where if you're an SEC team, you probably don't want to play Auburn if they're able to do all of that. So, and that's all without Joseph Gonzalez. Can Joseph Gonzalez come back? He's missed pretty much the whole season due to some shoulder. I forget if it's his shoulder or his elbow, but he kind of nicked it playing, doing some off-season stuff with Team USA. So can they figure all that out? If he can come back, all of a sudden that's 6 innings in a weekend that you don't have to worry about.
I actually saw a baseball bracketology earlier. Who knew? And it's got Auburn as a 3 seed.
Really?
They're playing, they're playing better baseball. So, and at last check, Zach, as we close out, it's my understanding that if you're into such things, you can still bet on Auburn baseball. You can't do that with the team across the state, but you can bet on Auburn baseball if you so choose to do so.
Yeah, what a wild thing. I actually didn't know you. I didn't know you could bet on college. I've never seen a sports book that allowed you to bet on college baseball. So that was my first question when I read that. But weird that came out, and then nobody really has a whole lot on it other than they're pulling Bama baseball lines. That's odd. I don't know if I've ever seen that, Doug.
Yeah, I got sent a story out of New Orleans saying this one will explain it all to you, and it didn't explain anything to me.
No, it just says unusual activity. It's well, what does that mean? Were you betting on LSU to sweep Alabama? Because they're sweeping a lot of people. That's not unusual. So, and then Alabama almost came back at the end. So yeah, weird storyline.
All right, Zach, give us all the ways that we can track you down. I know you do the written word as well as the spoken word and the visual word with Locked On Auburn and Auburn Daily.
Yeah, Locked On Auburn, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All you have to do is Google Locked On Auburn, and different ways to watch it will come up. All of our written work is at auburndaily.com. And if you're a fan of any team, just search Locked On, whatever that team is, professional or college. We probably have you covered. And if you're into the Braves, read all of our written work at bravestoday.com.